My younger brother James made my life hell for as long as I could remember. Growing up, he always seemed to have the upper hand. If you assumed it was because I was the unimportant child, you'd be wrong. James was, by far, the family's favorite, while I was left in the shadows. Our mother adored him. He was the golden child. She did everything for him, cooked his meals, did his laundry, even made sure he had help with his schoolwork, and she expected me to help him, just because we were family. It never occurred to her to ask me how I was doing. I was the more independent one, and I guess that made it easy for her to take me for granted. After all, I never complained. But James, he always got what he wanted. And the worst part was, when he needed something, he only came to me. He never offered to help me in return. It was always me, fulfilling his needs, without ever expecting anything in return. Growing up, I never minded much. I kept to myself, focused on my studies. James, on the other hand, was loud, rough, and always out seeking attention, just like our father. While I preferred silence and books, he craved the spotlight. It never seemed to matter that he was getting all the love and attention from our parents, though. I was different. I was an introvert, and for some reason, that was always a point of contention. James teased me for being different. He made fun of my height, my glasses, everything. It felt like I couldn't even have any privacy in my own home. He would sneak into my room, read my diary, and then tell Mom about it. When I told her, she brushed it off as nothing serious. He once even put stones in my cereal, and when I complained, Mom told me it was just something brothers do. The worst part of all was when he began siding with the kids who bullied me at school. Instead of protecting me, he called me things like nerd and loser, but it didn't stop there. One day he went too far. He told me to kill myself. At that time, I was already struggling with my mental health, and hearing those words from my own brother hit me harder than I'd like to admit. I couldn't understand how he could say that to me, but as usual, Mom just blamed me for provoking him. High school was a nightmare. There was one shocking incident that changed everything. James tried to set my hair on fire. I couldn't believe it. Mom defended him, saying it was just a game. Thankfully, Dad was the one who finally took it seriously. He threatened to call the police on James if it ever happened again, and for the first time in my life, I felt like my voice was heard. It was a turning point. For once, my parents actually sided with me. Dad even enrolled me in MMA classes. He told me to toughen up, stand my ground. It was hard for me, a nerdy kid trying to learn how to fight, but I pushed through. The classes taught me discipline, and I built strength, both physically and mentally. Slowly but surely, I became someone who could stand up for myself. One day after I had saved up some money for a few months by doing extra chores, James stole it. I caught him in the act. He tried to ride off on his bike with the money, but I confronted him, demanding it back. He mocked me, saying I would just run to Dad. But something snapped inside me, and I punched him in the face. For the first time in my life, I fought back. He was shocked and fell back. I grabbed my money and threw him to the ground. He started crying, but Mom rushed in, furious with me. She scolded me, saying I should be the bigger person. Dad, however, wasn't on her side. He told James that he was lucky I hadn't done worse, and that stealing was unacceptable. For the first time, I felt like my dad was finally backing me up. After that, James started keeping his distance. He realized I wasn't going to let him bully me anymore, but his attitude toward me didn't improve. He became angrier, more bitter, and still found ways to insult me when our parents weren't around. He would roll his eyes if I spoke to him and mutter insults under his breath. Every time I tried to talk to him, it felt like I was talking to a wall. Finally, when I graduated high school, I left home for college. I got a scholarship and started building my own life. My parents were proud, but James didn't care. He stayed aloof, refusing to acknowledge my accomplishments. The freedom I felt away from the toxic atmosphere at home was liberating. No more insults, no more bullying. It was at college that I met Karen. She was everything I could have asked for. We hit it off right away, and eventually she became my wife. But as happy as I was, there was a dark secret I didn't know. Throughout our relationship, I learned that Karen had cheated on me not once, but twice. Once with a coworker, and another time with an ex-boyfriend. I was crushed, but I forgave her, hoping we could move past it for the sake of our family. But then, Just 3 months ago, Karen dropped a bombshell. She admitted she'd been having a long-term affair with none other than James. To make matters worse, she even suggested that my son might not be mine. It was like a punch to the gut. My brother, the same person who had tormented me my whole life, had slept with my wife. And now I was raising a child who might not even be mine. When I confronted Karen, she told me that she and James had started spending time together when I introduced her to my family. He had always been polite to her, and they struck up a friendship that quickly escalated into something more. Karen told me she felt guilty and tried to break things off, but it was too late. She had already fallen for him. I didn't know what to do. I felt betrayed, lost, and completely devastated. My brother had taken everything from me, my wife, my trust, and even the future I thought I had with my son. After confronting both Karen and James, I realized something. I couldn't let him get away with it. I confronted James, caught him off guard, and exposed everything to our parents. At first, he denied it, but when I told him Karen had confessed, he tried to shift the blame. But it was too late. My father, who had always defended him, now had enough. He cut him off completely, including his college funds and any financial support. When my dad made it clear that James was no longer welcome in our lives, I felt a strange sense of relief. For once, I wasn't the one who was overlooked. I wasn't the one being hurt, but the hardest part was still ahead of me. Divorcing Karen and coming to terms with the fact that my son might not even be mine. It took time, but eventually I moved out. I got a bachelor's apartment and started fresh. But even as I took control of my life again, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. James never apologized. He never even reached out. And Karen? She begged me to stay for the sake of the child, but I couldn't. Every time I looked at him, I saw James. The whole situation has been a painful journey, but one thing is clear: I will never trust James again. And as for Karen, she can't erase what she did. No amount of apologies or explanations can make me forget what she and my brother took from me. Now, as I move forward, I'm stronger than ever, but I'll never forget the lessons I learned from this betrayal. Trust is fragile, and family can sometimes be the biggest source of pain. And while I've healed, I'll never allow either of them back into my life.